Across the United States, you'll find a religiously maintained bed of grass that's usually no more than 4 centimeters tall, the American lawn. It's everywhere, arranged in such a strict, basic design that's as uniquely American in the 21st and 20th century as it was unique for the British and French elite in the 18th. America was not always a land of turf grass. The American lawn is an invention, like any other, and it's an invention that can kinda suck. When European colonists arrived in the New World, they were greeted with a thin selection of cereals, such as little barley and corn. And this was a problem, because livestock from the Old World expects old crops. The annual grasses were nutritionally weak and needed to be replanted, and alternative food for livestock was either not abundant or inedible. So the colonists wrote back to their old countries, demanding the supply of their older grasses. Unintended weeds also spread, such as couch grass, knotgrass, and the dandelion. And then there's Poa pratensis, the alpha of turf grasses, a perennial cool season grass native to all of Europe, known for being highly palatable for livestock and producing large yields. Technically an invasive, it's one of the most popular grasses in the United States. It was the demand for high-yield pasture grass that introduced the materials, but there's a key difference between fields of grass that are trimmed by animals and fields of grass where no animals can be found. A lawn becomes a lawn when it has the aesthetic qualities of pasture without the actual presence of livestock, and that makes a lawn a difficult thing. Turf grasses are designed for grazed environments, and a grazed environment is not a pleasant one. For many plants, your reproduction and growth happens high, so if you reproduce where a predator's mouth begins, you're going to have problems, as true for plants as it is for mammals. But grasses are monoclydodons. It's not how you say it. They grow at their base. And this is important because when eaten from the top, they can still survive and grow. As long as the crown remains, grass will too. Turf grass co-evolved with grazing mammals, who have teeth specifically designed for consuming the grit that comes with grass. It's a hardy plant that doesn't just survive where grazing animals roam, it flourishes. Able to reproduce asexually, it outcompetes plants that need to reproduce from the top, and is able to survive constant cutting. But this is where the problem starts. Monocultured grass needs to be trimmed if you want it to stay uniform and green, and also if you want to keep it at a manageable height. But if you're not going to use a cow in the 1700s, you're going to be using labor, often involuntary. And there were only a few powerful American men who could afford that. Located in the US state, Virginia, is Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello, remarkable for being an architectural masterpiece, single-handedly designed by a President of the United States and founding father. What makes Monticello especially unique, though, is that it's also the location of one of the first true American lawns, a near-perfect combination of European landscape design, but located thousands of kilometers away from the place it comes from. The formalized idea of a lawn was the brainchild of a Frenchman, André Notre. He developed a wide range of gardens in France, including Versailles, where he treated gardening as a three-dimensional art, implementing complex grids with different permutations and patterns that manipulated your senses so that you'd perceive scale that wasn't there. It's Notre who's credited with creating the green carpet, a plane of flat grass that created the illusion of a never-ending straight line, helping represent the infinite scale of the Sun King's power and the French male ego. The lawn was born in France, but it grew up in England, where the formal, really strict tradition would ease up a bit. Relax, you know? And it's in England where Jefferson would end up traveling through as the American minister for France. There he would visit key locations, where he would see the product of the British genius, William Kent. Kent was like any other British man. He had a difficulty with maintaining a healthy relationship with alcohol while using deprecating humor to mask deep-seated trauma and depression. He started as a painter and also made valuable contributions towards British architecture, but it's his impact on landscape design that is the most important. Where the traditional French use of grass was formal, arranged in complex geometrical shapes, and intended for the use of grandeur, what Kent helped create was a lawn design that navigated a fine line between that French tradition while respecting certain aspects of nature that were there to begin with. Where the French lawn was kind of kitsch and in your face, the New English lawn was still kind of kitsch and in your face, but in a subtle way. It's Kent and another man who popularized the English landscape design that was more natural. A subtle use of lakes, groves of trees, and also random temples, as though the British aristocracy didn't have enough reasons to come off pretentious. Of these gardens, though, the most important feature that Kent largely popularized, not invented, was a ha-ha, a design that set in motion the separation between pasture and lawn. Ha-ha is the sunken fence that creates the illusion of a continuous landscape while also separating livestock from being too close to the home. For the elite, this is convenient. You can flaunt that you have long billowy fields of grass just for the sake of it, maintain the use of perspective without being exposed to livestock, but you also reduce the need for additional labor to cover the entire field, which are now only needed on a section of the raised land. And this is what Jefferson helped bring back to America. The idea of having a large section of land that mimicked pasture without having livestock to actually go on it. It was as true for Monticello as it was for Mount Vernon, George Washington's house, where he commanded and oversaw the construction of not one, but 3 ha-ha walls, with hundreds of slaves scything and weeding those lawns on a consistent basis. And it took years of incremental improvements in lawn equipment for the input costs of running a lawn to be reduced enough so that it could become a luxury that could be afforded by the middle class. And it was after World War II that the American lawn as we know it really began. A returning base of World War II veterans were rewarded with subsidized home ownership, opening the doors for new types of development. And this is where a chicken-egg problem emerges, a question a scientist can answer, but not someone who makes YouTube videos. Was it a demand of incoming new homeowners that spurred the development of green lawns, because lawns were always seen as a status symbol and demanded? Or did it largely happen in reverse, where a few developers with their own ideas of what was desirable helped create that demand by chance? I don't know. But what I do know is that there's a landscape architect and developer that's still important to mention here. Olmsted, one of the most influential Americans in history. He designed New York City's Central Park and Prospect Park, and was also the first landscape architect for the US Capitol. But he also helped design another thing, the American suburb. Riverside is a suburb near Chicago. It's recognized as one of the first planned suburban communities in the United States, designed by Olmsted and one other. It's in Riverside that he equipped homes with lawns, intended as public green space, by demanding setbacks, spatial requirements that separated a home from the public street. It's Olmsted that helped popularize generous setbacks as a standard model for suburban homes. And in the US, everything is bigger, and that also means the setbacks, which are larger than a European alternative where turf grasses are actually naturally occurring. So when suburbia increased, setbacks and the lawns that came with it rose as well. But this is where the painful irony emerges. Spend any time in Northern Europe, or in the British Isles generally, and you'll be overwhelmed by large billowing fields of green pasture everywhere. It's honestly kind of boring. It's as though the large green fields of grass are natural, which, well, they kind of are. See, you can try and bring grasses from the old country to the new, but bringing the environment with you, you cannot. Most turf grasses are made for the moist, less varied cool climate of Northern Europe, not for the more variable weather conditions of North America. But a plant not being natural doesn't mean that plant can't be naturalized. Humans are animals after all. You're a monkey, don't ever forget it. And much like other animals, humans can also distribute seeds naturally. But to get the environment of grass in the US to be like it is in Northern Europe still requires more external intervention, be it water and nutrients or pesticides. And the need to actively create a new environment has never stopped Americans from producing the lawn. And produce it they do. Lawn mowing used to be a communal family affair. A father would pick out a son with the smallest chance of going to a liberal arts college, and he would educate him in the practice of lawn mowing. But this has left its humble origins. The scale of the landscaping industry has grown. What started with a rotary push mower, dangerous enough, has developed into the zero-turn lawnmower, a perfect example of the large-scale efficiency gains in the industry, widely adopted because it can turn in place, small gains in time that compound over time. Millions upon millions are spent on the industry, ranging from pesticides, irrigation contracts, to different types of mowers. But maybe the best example of the bizarreness of the American landscaping industry is the leaf blower.
Leaf blowers have a high-pitched, screeching whine. It's impossible to think.
Leaf blowers have engines that go thousands of revolutions per minute, 3 times the speed of a car engine. And if standing 15 meters away from a blower, you'll experience around 68 to 76 decibels of noise. That's a lot. But for the operator, it's even louder, 98 to 106, more than enough to cause permanent hearing loss. And then there's also the other damage. The 2-stroke engine of a leaf blower is widely inefficient, producing more than 10 times the amount of carbon monoxide as a new light vehicle, and more than 40 times the particulate matter. And it's that engine that's attached to the back of a laborer, who not only has to face potential permanent hearing loss, but also dangerous fumes on an hourly basis for days, weeks, years on end. But what makes the relationship between America and lawn even weirder is how the US is seen. Many think of the US as a country of individuality. There's a unique ability for one to hold property and act in a certain way that should not be treaded on. It's a country more interested in negative freedom than positive when compared to the others. But wide-scale lawn adoption by your neighbors is most definitely treading on you and impacting your freedom. Own a piece of property that is connected to a water supply, and it's likely that wide-scale use of nitrogen fertilizers from your neighbors can produce runoff that causes algae blooms on yours, decreasing oxygen in the water and killing organisms on your property. Someone is treading on you. Decide that you'd like to stop mowing your lawn and let it grow to its natural state. You want to exercise your freedom, but doing this can cause you to be fined and face legal consequences, people directly treading on you. Decide that you'd like to grow native plants, help return a well-functioning ecosystem of insects and small mammals, and you'll likely still face a wide use of pesticides that run off onto your property and kill them, slowly. Pesticides are varied and have come a long way from substances like lead arsenate, an insecticide used on lawns that could create permanent, long-lasting brain damage in children. But today, plenty of pesticides are still used, with somewhat vague effects. One of the most common insecticide groups used by the landscaping industry in the US, and also agriculture, is neonicotinoids, accounting for 25% of the global pesticide market. The European Commission banned 3, clothianidin, imidacloprid, and thiophoxam, due to their ability to harm food chains and its connection to honeybee colony collapse disorder. They're a very efficient invertebrate killer. But in the US, there are no bans. There's also carbaryl, one of the most widely used insecticides in the landscaping industry in the US, also banned by the European Commission for being highly toxic to aquatic life and its potential to cause cancer. In the US, it's only recently getting removed from residential use. But the effects of pesticides are complex. The age of a person and dosage matters. Pesticides can come in complex cocktails, and there's also a conversation to be had about needing to produce food at scale with adequate pest management. Agriculture is a different beast than a lawn. But on your property, don't you have the right to determine what intentionally applied substances have a chance of leaching onto your land, a land where your children can, still, play with developing brains, a land where you attempt to demonstrate what makes your country so beautiful in the first place? If you don't have that right, isn't that a perfect example of your neighbors and community treading on you? This is the amount of hours you have in a week, and this is the amount of time you spend on your phone. What would happen if you were to turn just 1 hour of those multiple hours each day into an hour of math and science? What kind of person would you be in a year if you did that every day? Brilliant is not just interesting because it makes you better able to understand physical reality through math and science, but it's also interesting because it's a tool that fundamentally improves you. Multiple hours a day mindlessly scrolling can make anyone feel guilty about their phone addiction, but spending a few hours with your phone each day and getting better at math, now, that's something easier to justify. Brilliant makes you a formidable person. You can get it right now without moving, and at brilliant.org/hoch, the first 200 subscribers who decide to take that first step can get 20% off on a tool that is guaranteed to give you some of your life and time back.